Every cigarette in a Hollywood close-up was a lie wearing good lighting. The studios sold smoke as sophistication, as rebellion, as the look of someone who had everything under control. What the cameras never showed was the bill coming due off-set, in collapsed lungs, ruined voices, and bodies that gave out decades before their time. Tonight, we're going through the stars who paid that bill in full. Start with the man who wrote some of television's darkest warnings and somehow never saw the one closest to him. Rod Serling built The Twilight Zone into something no writer had ever pulled off, and then spent the rest of his life terrified he'd never do it again. That fear didn't fade. It followed him from project to project, and he fed it the only way he knew how: cigarettes and whiskey, in quantities that should have been impossible. At his worst, Serling was smoking 4 packs a day. By 1975, his arteries had had enough, and the bypass surgery meant to save him became the thing that killed him. He was 50 years old. The man who scared America with fiction left behind a true story far darker than anything he wrote. Jackie Gleason didn't have habits, exactly. He had appetites, and they ran the show. The man behind Ralph Cramden could put away several full meals in a single sitting, top it off with a gallon of ice cream, and chase it with scotch like it was tap water. His weight swung as wildly as his moods, from 230 pounds to over 330. And underneath all of that was a 5-pack-a-day cigarette habit that nobody around him could believe. Gleason joked about it more than he worried about it, right up until colon cancer caught up with him at 71. He left behind one of television's most beloved characters, and a body that had been quietly losing a fight for years. Then there's Richard Burton, a man who could turn a Shakespeare line into a thunderclap, and somehow made his cigarette habit sound just as dramatic. In a 1977 interview, he admitted to going through 60 to 100 cigarettes a day. His own brother later wrote that the real number was at least 100 every single day, without exception. That's not a vice, that's a second full-time job. Burton had the voice and the talent few actors ever get close to, and underneath all of it, a body running on borrowed time. Bette Davis earned her reputation the hard way. 5 consecutive Oscar nominations, 2 wins, and a stare that could end an argument before it started. She wasn't a paid cigarette spokesperson, and smoking only showed up in about a quarter of her films. But she insisted that when a character smoked, the cigarette had to be real and lit, not a prop being waved around for effect. Off camera, the habit ran far deeper than any role required, close to 4 packs a day by some accounts, with Davis claiming she couldn't go 10 minutes without lighting up. She reportedly kept smoking into her final years, even as she fought breast cancer, the disease that ultimately took her at 81. Not the smoking itself, just everything else it had been quietly working against. Humphrey Bogart didn't just smoke in his movies. He turned the cigarette into part of the performance. The story goes that during a slow shoot full of long monologues, a director needed something to keep Bogart occupied and the audience engaged, so he handed him a cigarette to work with between lines. It worked so well that smoking became part of his on-screen identity for the rest of his career, to the point that cigarettes themselves picked up the nickname bogeys. Off-screen, he was going through about 2 packs a day along with heavy drinking, and the cough he kept ignoring turned out to be esophageal cancer by the time he finally saw a doctor in 1956. Hollywood had sold his smoking as effortless cool. His own body told a very different story. John Wayne, 6'4", built like the frontier itself, the face of more than 170 films and over 4 decades at the top of the industry. From his teenage years onward, he was rarely without a cigarette, and by the time he was filming westerns in the 1950s, he was reportedly going through 7 packs of unfiltered Camels a day, the same brand he was paid to advertise. In 1964, surgeons removed most of his left lung. 15 years later, stomach cancer finished what the cigarettes had started, and Wayne died at 72. The toughest hero on the screen couldn't outlast the one habit that never gave him a fair fight. 6 stories in, and already a pattern. The bigger the legend, the harder the fall seems to land. But the strangest stories, the ones involving a damaged singing voice, a Hollywood king Hitler wanted captured alive, and a star who filmed his own warning from beyond the grave, are still ahead. Spencer Tracy spent decades collecting bad habits the way other people collect hobbies: alcohol, chain smoking, pills, and a weight problem that never let up. On screen, he looked steady and calm. Off screen, his body was keeping score the whole time. On July 21st, 1963, that score caught up with him. A severe attack of breathlessness sent him to the hospital, and 2 years later, doctors confirmed hypertensive heart disease. The years of indulgence hadn't disappeared, they'd just been waiting. By the end, Tracy was almost a prisoner in his own home, his world shrinking down to 4 walls while his health kept slipping. The one thing that held steady through it all was Katharine Hepburn, whose presence stayed constant right through his final years. Proof that even a body wrecked by vice can still hold on to something worth living for. Sammy Davis Jr. ran with the Rat Pack, where the whole act was built on looking dangerous. Whiskey, women, smoke, swagger. Except a lot of that image was exactly that. An image. Sinatra, Martin, and Davis would often appear to be knocking back hard liquor on stage while actually drinking apple juice. But the smoking was real, and Sammy took it somewhere none of his bandmates did. He smoked while singing, taking a drag mid-performance and exhaling the smoke right into the next note. It looked effortless on stage. It was anything but effortless on his vocal cords. Nat King Cole warned him directly that the heat from the smoke could damage his voice permanently, and Sammy kept doing it anyway because the bit worked too well to drop. By the 1980s, the damage was no longer theoretical. A throat specialist confirmed inflamed nodules on his vocal cords, exactly what Cole had predicted years earlier. Some habits look stylish right up until they take the one thing that made you special. Clark Gable didn't just play larger-than-life characters. Hollywood genuinely crowned him the king for it, and the Rhett Butler swagger that won him an Oscar for It Happened One Night wasn't far from his real personality. In 1942, at the absolute peak of his fame, he walked away from it to join the Army Air Forces, flying real combat missions over Germany and earning the Air Medal and Distinguished Flying Cross along the way. Adolf Hitler reportedly admired him enough to offer a reward for his capture: alive. But behind the medals, Gable was going through 3 packs of unfiltered cigarettes a day for over 30 years, on top of cigars and pipe tobacco. On November 16, 1960, his 4th heart attack finally ended it. Even a man Hitler wanted captured alive couldn't outrun what 30 years of smoke had done to his heart. Audrey Hepburn is remembered as elegance itself, the face of Breakfast at Tiffany's and Roman Holiday, a woman so graceful that even her cigarette holder looked like a museum piece. That image made the truth land harder. Hepburn reportedly smoked 2 to 3 packs a day for much of her adult life. On screen, the cigarette in her hand looked chic and harmless. In reality, it was just as dangerous as it was for every chain-smoking tough guy on this list. It simply wore better clothes. Hepburn's legacy is built on grace, humanitarian work, and some of the most iconic images in film history. But her smoking is a quiet reminder that the damage doesn't care how gentle or beloved you are. That's the full list. 12 legends, 1 habit, and more warnings than Hollywood ever wanted to admit it was selling.